Next In.
Welcome to Next In. Ooh, it is getting hotter and hotter, which means we are getting closer and closer to summer, which I'm sure everyone is more and more excited about. That's why I get to wear short sleeves today. So welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are really honored and excited to have Kaj Pedersen here, CTO of AstrumU, going to be giving us a lot of insights into basically everything. He's more or less going to solve the world's problems here in the next 45 minutes or so. So I would definitely stay tuned. So thank you guys for joining us. Kaj, thank you so much for joining Shane and I. Obviously, Shane, CEO, and I'm COO of Next Level, and we are hosting Next In's podcast. Everything tech, tech, gaming, hiring, you name it, we're going to talk about it. So, and probably get into some stuff about Seattle too, and maybe even a little bit about Africa. And you guys are like, what? Yep. So Kaj, tell us a little bit about your story. That's where I like to start, is like, you're CTO of this company. You've obviously had a really successful career. It has not exactly been incredibly linear, which a lot of people, I think, hey, to become a CTO or to get into engineering management, I got to go to this school, get this degree, do this exact thing, and boom, it happens. But your career path, not exactly that exact linear route. So tell us how you got to where you're at.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Taylor and Shane. Appreciate being here. Obviously, that question is in itself is quite ambitious to answer, so I'll try and make it as simple and easy in my response. You're right. Careers are very non-linear. In fact, if you look at anybody's career trajectory, there is no one sort of successful story where somebody's just chosen the job and kind of moved up in that direction. And if they have, I feel sorry for them, because it must be a very boring existence. So in my own journey, I mean, frankly, I started out quite humbly. I was a programmer. I did computer science. Did software engineering for about 10 years. Most of that was in the UK, primarily working for, believe it or not, British coal, so mining, Eagle Star Insurance, and then I went into Cargill financial markets, so capital markets, and that's where the sort of the apprenticeship, if you want, was formed, and it allowed me to start from mainframes and then move into PCs and client server technologies, which was all the rage in the 90s. So now I've just revealed my age. I am an old dude.
Yeah, he's 33 years old. This is wonderful.
That's right. But that's when it was really exciting in terms of technology. That's when the big bang kind of happened in terms of the financial services. And that's where trading really got exciting. And then there was a lot of opportunity to work with real-time systems, trading platforms. There was so many inefficiencies in the market that could be closed. And the funny thing about back in those days in the 90s, working with the traders were the guys, right? They were they were the storied people. They were the ones everyone was talking about. And I'll always recall a story with one trader who's like, he was the big guy at the desk, and he was sort of saying, "Oh, it's great being a trader. What's it like to be a software engineer guy?" And I looked at him. I said, "Well, you realize we're going to replace you guys." And he was totally shocked. And it's like, look, a lot of the stuff you're doing, arbitrage, it can be programmed. A lot of the risk management can be programmed. And that led me ultimately to San Francisco in 1994, taking that big plunge. Trader in London got relocated to San Francisco, calls me up out of the blue, says, "We got some challenges out here. What you did in London, do you think you can do it here?" So I said, "Well, yeah, let's meet in London." He said, no, fly out. And so they flew me out, met with the team, and at the end of the week, that had a job offer in hand and came back to the UK to make a decision. And that ultimately brought me to the US in 94 to San Francisco, which was an incredibly interesting time for technology, because that's where things were beginning to happen in the Valley. Now, for a number of those years, I was kind of in San Francisco, hearing about things, seeing things, but never really engaged with that startup scene until I think it was 1997, if memory serves me correctly, when our owner of the asset management business decided to get out of asset management and focus in on private banking. And so my job opportunity then had me making a choice between leaving San Francisco and going to Houston, Texas. And I was like, well, there's not a lot going on in Houston. There's a ton going off in the Valley. So that's when I actually went off and joined a company called Quote.com, revolutionized trading systems in the sense that we enabled the individual active trader to participate in the markets in a way that nobody else could have envisaged. And, Chris Cooper, who's the founder of that company, had this idea, started actually really very simply, FTP site, you put in a stock quote, you got the details back. That's how he started. And that was in 94. By the time I joined, we were now revolutionizing things in terms of creating a web presence, allowing people to get their quotes. And then we introduced streaming quotes, streaming news, streaming charts, and changed the game in a way that I always used to say we had the largest single trading floor in the world. At 6:30 in the morning, we had over 30,000 people logged into our site, ready to go. And that's when I got the startup bug. And
that was all pre E-Trade,
It was around about the time when they were just starting, to be honest with you. So we were the first financial services firm, I think, financial services consumer model on the internet. We came in 94.
That's incredible. So you've had like a lot of, experience where you were like, how do we revolutionize this? How do we automate this? How do we build platforms, scale, etc. But I'm curious, and, I kind of want to take a little bit of a step back, right? Which was like, how did you even get the spark to want to go into technology in the first place, right? Because I think some of the people that happen to listen to this, like maybe they're engineers, maybe they're directors, they eventually want to become CTOs. And honestly, maybe some of them are just people that are like, why would I want to become an engineer? And like, where do you figure out if that's even a passion, right? So like, do you remember the moment where you were like, that's what I want to do. This seems exciting. Let's go down that path.
It's kind of funny. My journey actually was to go into biochemistry. Then I had a crisis of confidence. I couldn't see myself in a lab coat in a lab doing that as a job. But what really sparked me, and it's one of those moments where it's a conversation I remember with my dad, and I had been exposed to microcomputers at school very early on, and I was able to get a sense of you could do things, you could actually program, you had control of your environment in a way that, outside of those years of teenage angst, you didn't have a lot of control of, but you could certainly control the environment in computers, and that got me excited. But it wasn't until I went to, and this kind of makes me out to be a real nerd now, but hey, what the hell, nerds rule the world, right? I went to the British Museum, and they had a computing display on, and I must have been about 16 at the time. And I remember going in and seeing how all of this stuff came together and how it actually originated, right? Very simple stuff. You have the Babbage machine, and you've got ticker tape and things, and you kind of begin to see the fundamentals at a very simple level, and then this idea of ones and zeros and just switches, and then scaling that, and then using electronics, and then the transformers came along, and so on and so forth. And the transistors, came along, which revolutionized it further, and then, of course, the silicon chip. And that was just fascinating to me, to see how you could build on these different levels and constantly evolve ideas through the practical aspects of the physics and the technology. And I guess that's what got me excited, is that you could do something meaningful if you're willing to put your hands into the business. And so when I'm sitting down with my dad, I was like, Dad, I just don't see myself as a biochemist. I know Mum's going to be totally, upset if I kind of flunk out and don't even go to university. And he looked at me and says, well, what do you think is going to get you out of bed in the morning? And I said, well, actually, I think this will. He says, well, do it. You've got nothing to lose. And so I did. And, in hindsight, that was probably a really good piece of advice to galvanize around.
Take a leap of faith, get it going, just run for it. And then, so was it when you were talking with the stock traders where you're like, the fact that you're like, this can be replaced? Like, because I know that you started the story there. So I wasn't like, was that the turning point, or was that more of like, I'm confident in technology so much that I'm going to watch you and find areas of opportunity? I'm just trying to figure that part out.
No, I think actually it started sooner than that. I mean, I saw it. I was lucky when I came into British Coal. I was in my university. They call it a sandwich year, which is where you get a year, and your third year is spent in industry, working and actually practicing your art. And so when I went into British Coal, I was on the mainframe side. I was programming mainframes, setting up my code and working within a mainframe, very structured, very large kind of environment. And at the end of the year, my boss actually said, you know what, we think we like you. We want you to come back regardless of whether you get your degree or not. And it was like, I wish he hadn't said that bit though, because that just like, when the pressure's off,
Oh yeah.
like party time. But the long and short of it was, I went back, but before I came back, they said, we're going to give you a choice of project. We want you to work on this mainframe project, which is tracking rail trains and the coal carriages around the country. And the data would be uploaded to the mainframe, and then they could actually see the movement of coal around the country through their trains. Or there's this open cast thing, kind of experimenting with these PCs and networks and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a bit of a, that's a hobby project. We really want you on this. And I said, well, actually, do you mind if I go work on that one? And I know I disappointed him because he wanted me on this one, which he called AVI, the Automatic Vehicle Identification Project on the mainframe. But I went for the PC one. And that was, for me, the eye-opener. I mean, I got to, not only did I have to write the code to operate the PCs, working with a team, and there was only a small team. There was like 6 of us working on this. We had to write the code that enabled us to read the way bridges. We had to write that in C. Then we had to translate that so it could be read by our application code. We had to write all of the screen interfaces. We had to write all of the magnetic card read-write interfaces. We had to, lay our own fiber. We had to splice it. We had to connect the network ourselves. We had to build the PCs ourselves. So it was one of those projects where there was no expertise around, and you just had to figure it out. And that was just phenomenal. And
well, you probably should have stuck with the mainframes. I mean, that's really the future, right? Is the mainframes. So
in hindsight, you know what? There's a lot of business in the mainframe still, right? In fairness, but this was the space, and it was just incredible because now that you had the nuts to bolts understanding of it all, I ended up using that to kind of go into the insurance business where they were revolutionizing. They were trying to automate a lot of the insurance business, but they were doing it on the mainframe. And I came in with this, PC support group, and the reason why they set that group up, and it's a really funny story, was because the mainframe project was taking so long, they had to keep their insurance branches happy and doing work. So we would go in and build these solutions for them really quickly so they could keep evolving their product. And the problem, however, was we were too successful that they called into question this £60 million investment in the mainframe. So this was an interesting opportunity in Office Dynamics where suddenly the priority review group would say, yeah, we're not prioritizing that work for the PCs, so that the branch would be forced to go to the mainframe. Of course, that left me sitting there twiddling my thumbs, going, oh, well, this isn't really interesting. So that's why I moved into capital markets. And because of that experience and seeing how we could make an impact and how, innovation in a very funny way can accelerate things with unintended consequences, it was easy for me to connect the dots. And that's where I think the markets helped. I started to look at the dots on a more macro level and saying, well, how do you connect these to deliver the upside, and what's the risk involved in that? And that's where it all sort of kind of came together.
So you got into the financial markets, and if, like for me, I'm listening and I'm going, okay, cool. So you did this pre-E-Trade. You guys literally set up a website where you could type in, MSFT, and it would say it's $37.16. And that's all it did. And yet that was revolutionary and was able to provide a ton of value, probably make some people pretty rich. And then obviously turned in, then you get E-Trade afterward and
well, here's the funny thing. It also taught me the value of the MVP, right? And this is the thing that people miss. The MVP, the minimal viable product that people are willing to pay for because it solves that immediate problem, is an amazing concept to learn at a very early age, because a lot of people want to build the perfect thing out of the gate, and actually the customer doesn't really want the perfect thing. They want the thing that's going to solve the problem right in front of them. And then you can build on that success and you can kind of iterate on it. So, I kind of realized that gold plating was a challenge for the industry. Everybody wanted to kind of make get the best designs, the perfect experience, etc. Doesn't exist. Just doesn't exist. So stop gold plating.
And part of it, I think, to your point too, right, is like we want something that hooks us, gets us in. It's solving an immediate problem, but then I think that we're all naturally inclined to want to buy into a service that's naturally growing with us. So like as we're identifying new problems and new things and new nuggets, we can start expanding with it. And if you have a solution that just solves everything too fast, it's kind of like having a menu it's like I'm going to the Cheesecake Factory when all I really want is, I want some Chinese food, but why am I at the Cheesecake Factory?
That's
right. And sometimes it's like, simplify it, let me figure it out, and then let's grow with each other.
So what is and again, this is going to solve all the world's problems. So hopefully everyone's listening real closely here. What is the next financial market that needs this, that really there is no one doing it or doing it even close to being well enough, and needs to be an almost overnight automation? Like what is it, like you said in 94, it was the financial
space. The funny thing about financial markets is their success is begotten when you can optimize, but you can do it in a trusted and transparent way. And so it's really follow the regulators. And the inefficiencies today exist, frankly, in the cyber market, where you've got a lot of coins out there, you've got a lot of opportunity to speculate, and speculation is has a huge downside risk for the ordinary punter. But the ordinary punter wants to get into Bitcoin. They want to be able to own that. And so it's important for a market, frankly, the health of a market, so that all participants can play in it in a way that it enables others to understand how to manage the risk, the transparency that comes with it. And so when the regulators move into that market, that is when you want to be in there in technology. It's okay to be an early mover, but that's a speculative play, right? If you want to be a business player and you want to build technology that satisfies a customer need, watch what the regulators do. And so when the SEC starts to think about how it's going to organize around the Bitcoin market, that's the time to say, okay, now we've got a framework that we can build around, and you can bet your bottom dollar that every consumer is going to want to be a part of it, because, damn it, I have to account for my taxes for every time I do a transaction on this. That's such a pain. Can somebody do it for me? Or there's going to be can I trust this vehicle for my investments in Bitcoin? There's a whole bunch of things there that customers and also the providers want to create so that transparency can exist. And yeah, sure, the speculative piece goes away, so the upside wildness goes away. But I think people prefer to have some certainty around their investment so they can actually get value from it. And that's where I see the next opportunity in the financial services.
But outside of what I'm getting at is outside of financial services, what is the next industry that needs this level of automation?
Education.
What'd you say?
Education.
So and I don't disagree with you, and I know that that's an area you have a lot of opinions, and so do I. Yep. My kids are younger. Your kids are actually in the university system. So why do you think education, you said, needs so much disruption?
So, I kind of looked at this. So those for my journey, there was like finance was the first one, because without money, you can't make choices. And then the next industry I was involved in, where I saw a lot of change, was healthcare. And of course, if you don't have transparency in the healthcare space, you can't enjoy your finances, right? And then the piece that really kind of closes the loop is that if you can't learn and you can't continually evolve your skills and adapt and succeed in terms of transitions, different pathways, you can't get wealth, and you certainly can't enjoy your health. So it's sort of, for me, it's a nice kind of bookend to my journey, where if we can find a way to help individuals verify the skills that they have so they can be translated into competencies, and use that to make recommendations on what pathways they can take, whether that's for last mile training, reskilling, upskilling, or what roles they can go into, because we can identify the skills they have now and what they need to do to close that gap. That's huge. I mean, and it's kind of revolutionary as well, because today our model is broken. Today our model is you get a degree, you pay through the nose for that degree, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get a job at the end of it. And in some cases, the job is woefully inadequate for the degree that you have, and you still have your student loans. So it's a broken system. And there's 55 million people in the marketplace today who don't have any kind of degree whatsoever, but I guarantee that they have skills and they have capabilities and experiences that will enable them to be successful in those open roles that we can't fill in the marketplace today. So we're doing our economy a massive disservice by not enabling this 55 million cohort to get access to that work for various reasons. A lot of it is because companies, they say, rather interestingly, they always say you have to have a degree for the job that you're going to go into. I think that's just a cop-out. That's an HR filter. Or where instead, if they could look at it and say, well, what experiences do you have? What skills do you have? Can they be verified? And can we surface it up in a transparent and unbiased way so that you can actually be the right person for that job? That's powerful. And that's actually economically powerful as well.
Is that what you're doing right now at AstrumU?
That's exactly what we're trying to solve right now.
Okay, so this is going to be the little bit of the sales pitch for AstrumU. Give me a good use case for that, like where you've seen, person X or whatever. Just kind of explain a use case for it.
Yeah, so at AstrumU, our goal, right, is to build pathways using the largest comprehensive source of learning and working skills in the world, so that any individual can advance to greater economic mobility. How does that translate? So we have a project right now called JMCI, where we're working with veterans who are transitioning out of the military, and we're enabling them to translate those skills that they've got in the military into skills that are understandable in the civilian side. And so, with those veterans coming out, we're helping them align with jobs that T-Mobile have offered. And we got Wiley is providing the content for the training to help us support closing the gap. But the most important thing is that we can translate the skills that they've gained in the military. So tank driver, how do you translate their skills into something in the civilian side? Really hard. Most civilian managers sit there and go, great, you can drive a tank. What does that mean to this role? Okay, fair question. So what we do is we say, well, look, this guy's got logistical skills. This guy's got mechanical skills. This guy can actually work with technology. This individual's also got an ability to work under pressure, and perhaps the most severe pressure, because frankly, a tank is a big iron thing that can be easily targeted. And so you have somebody who's got grit. You have somebody who's got communication skills. You have somebody who's clearly got courage, and they also have these other hard skills. Who wouldn't want to hire somebody like that if you could translate it into that language? That's the best use case I can give you.
Got it. Okay, I think that's an awesome use case. We actually work with some veterans. We are working currently trying to get into a similar idea of like working through. We can bring a veteran in and help train them and work with them internally for us. But I agree, as from an employer standpoint, especially in the world where in the technology space, you either know C++ or you don't. You either have worked in Java or you haven't. It's a very strict, like, here's what it is. But if it's not in a technical field, all of a sudden soft skills start to become very important, right? Now, granted, soft skills are important in the tech space too, but like, I can't necessarily sit down and go, do you have Java? When have you used it? How many years of experience in Java? How about Kafka? How about Go? Whatever. So you're helping to say, hey, here are some of the soft skills that they've learned through their experience in this case, in this use case, by driving a tank, things like courage, communication skills, etc.
Yeah, and it doesn't just apply to that, right? So our other product is what we call Ready Set, and it's for enrollment for graduates into university. So a graduate comes along and they're interested in seeing how they can grow into another role. So this is where they're looking at adjacent pathways, and they've said they're a programmer who's now looking to go into management. And I want to do an MBA, but what area of management do I want to go into? Do I want to go into product marketing? Do I want to go into product management? Whatever it may be. And so what we can do is we can kind of get a sense of who they are. We get them to give some profile information, and we use that to see what skills they have now and what gap they need to close. And then we can offer up to them recommendations in terms of the programs or the role or even compensation if they're interested. in terms of if they take this pathway, and that this pathway will close the gap by this much, so that you have a higher degree of opportunity to close that role that you're looking for as you change your journey. And so there's a number of things that we can do around skills, particularly if they're verified, and that's the important thing. We really base our understanding of that learner profile at an individual level on verified skills first, and then we augment it with other pieces of information that we can get from the public domain to give us a sense of where they are today and how their trajectory has taken them to this point.
And so why do you think, you said the education system is broken? Where is it failing the student, if you will?
So I think the cost is too high, in fairness. I also have been looking at universities, and since 2010, their enrollments have been in decline. So that's telling you something. It's telling you that people do not value the degree because they're not enrolling for it. And there's a number of reasons. One, I think it could be the cost is too high and it doesn't tie to an outcome, a clear pathway. And universities, to some degree, have kind of put themselves in this position, right? Because they kind of said, well, we're not really worried about what your career outcome is. We're not, you're coming to do the degree because we want you to kind of think in this way. And it's very ivory tower kind of approach to offering a product, when in fact, the product is about how do you meet the market demand around roles that are emerging. And I'll give you a good example. I was working at Wolters Kluwer for the CEO on 2 projects. One was on big data and the other one was on capability. And on the capability management, I mean, big data for me was like, oh yeah, I can see where this is going, kind of interesting, boom, 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 did that. But the capability piece was fascinating because we looked at the market, and I remember trawling through all these job sites, Google, Microsoft, and others. And one of the roles that caught my attention was this concept of a data scientist. And it was like, well, what's a data scientist? So I drilled into it a little bit further, and I was looking, and it became clear: business analyst, statistician, econometrics, quantitative analysts. And I was like, oh, okay, people who know how to mess around with statistics and data, but at scale. And so that's what the data scientist was. And so I then went to the next piece, which is, well, how do they learn these skills? So I looked at universities, naturally. Nothing there. Absolutely nothing there. And that was in 2013. It wasn't until 2017 that you started to see data science programs emerging from universities. That's almost a 5-year gap between where the market need was and when they were actually offering product to the market. So it's no real surprise when somebody's looking to university and saying, do I want to do this degree? Maybe because it might get me this job. Well, that's not.
Or maybe you're 5 years behind.
Yeah.
Maybe you're 5 years behind, which gets super frustrating, right? And I think to an extent, like you tapped on something earlier that where I think sometimes is overlooked too, which is when you went to university, you did like that co-op program, and it was a part of this. You called it the sandwich days, or
apprenticeship kind of program.
The apprenticeship program, like Waterloo does that, UBC does that. Like there are very few universities that actually encourage and create real partnerships with organizations to help people, go, hey, if you want to get a degree here in this specific field, like you are required to go work and go do something in that field to make sure that you want to do it. And I think that some universities are simply scared of doing that because their programs might, drop even further, like you already mentioned. And I even think that's broken, where it's like co-op programs should be required. And I know in the UK and in Canada, they're heavily enforced. That doesn't happen here in the US.
No, and it's interesting because, there is, by the way, and I don't want to be totally disparaging on this, because I do know that there's some interesting systems right now working on this problem. They're starting to try and figure it out, and they realize they need to get to a model that enables them to kind of be more valuable to the outside world, to career opportunities and so on, and trying to find pathways. But this is a problem that's been in the making for a long time, and now it's catching up. And the economy can't afford to wait. And so universities need to make that adaptation. And I'm pleased to say that the industry, I think, is making that move. But now they need the tools and the capabilities to do it. But the point that you made in terms of those apprenticeship opportunities, those abilities for universities to work with their business community, actually has another really wonderful upside. And that upside is the universities are hearing what the businesses are telling them that they need. Super valuable. And not only that, they're building relationships with those businesses. So as their economy around them grows, the university grows. And that is a healthy ecosystem. That's one where both parties are at the table. They're both trying to figure out what's it going to take to make us both successful. And therefore, the value in the product starts to materialize. And then as a student, you come in and say, well, I'm going to go to Waterloo, or in my case, Wolverhampton, because I can see at the end of it, I can get a job, and I can get a degree that actually relates to the journey that I want to take.
Yeah, and that's Shane and I. Our background where we met was in a internship program, a training ground for university students that was meant for, instead of theoretical learning, it was more applied, right? It was to actually take it and put it into practice and learn a lot of soft skills and so on. Which, to your point, and you said it, and again, I don't want to dog out every single university or every single career center because they're not all like this. But by and large, I think it became an ivory tower of the career centers at these universities were these giant bureaucracies where sometimes there were anywhere from 50 to 100 employees in an and all they really did was try to bring in the large enterprises, give us $10,000, we put your name on it, we put you in a career fair, and that's the extent of it. And it was the employer needs us, we don't need them. But it's got to be a relationship that works both ways. The university needs to listen to the market and go, what do you need? And we need to start creating pathways to reach it. I know, I believe it was Kansas State, like the state of Kansas had come out with, you had to, when they would announce a degree program at any of a state university, they had to say what the average person would make when they left school. So that students, because the other challenge is student goes off to school, it's like, hey, I really like art, I'm very creative, I'm going to get an art history degree. And then when they graduate, they struggle to get a job. And most jobs in that field tend to either be academia or I don't use my degree at all. Well, I should know that coming in, right?
It's absolutely. And it's actually, I'm glad you mentioned Kansas because our CEO is a Kansas University alum, so he's a big fan, right? But we were also incubated out of Kansas University.
Okay.
So our idea was incubated because they saw that potential value. And so we have a very strong relationship with that system, primarily because of the way they were thinking about how should the market change. And that was, over 4 years ago that we involved ourselves in that way. And even my son, I'll take, we did the, so I went to school in the UK. So the American system was a little bit alien to me. And so when we did the rounds, one of the questions was, well, great that you want to do this, but how does that degree actually lead to a job? And his mum and I are very kind of, pragmatic in that regard. And so Columbia was another school where we were impressed that they actually worked with their local business community, and the lecturers they brought in, the professors they brought in, were industry experienced and had that capability to offer to the students as well. And so for me, it was like, well, I can see why this school's valuable to you. And fortunately, it was the one that spoke to him as well. But you're starting to see schools do things like that.
It's probably why their MBA program is so freaking incredible, right? Like,
no, this is Columbia College, in Chicago.
Yeah, that's Columbia College in Chicago. The Columbia College in New York has it has very, should we say, very well known and huge reputation around its programs as well. But Columbia College in Chicago is kind of more on that vocational side. I think they're very focused on how to enable success for their students, and of course they've already got a lot of good examples of outcomes on that.
And you said earlier your son, well, you said it to me off camera, your son is in game design, so it's actually like it is very vocational, right? Like it is in something that we do is we work with a lot of video game companies, and it's interesting that he's now able to even go get a degree because that's what the market needs.
Yeah.
They need people, and so they're starting to, in a lot of ways, it's like a trade school, right? Which is really what college and, it's meant for. It's meant to learn and higher learning and train your brain how to think. So I can understand, hey, every kid needs to take an English 101 class and a science course, even if they're not going to be in science. They got to do some general thinking to really exercise the brain. But yes, that vocational teaching is really important. And that was where I think it got lost a little bit. And I think a school like Columbia College, probably because it is not Columbia University and doesn't have, all the badges behind it, it's probably looking at it from a much more pragmatic approach of we're here to train our students, and they're doing a great job. And again, I go back to the Kansas thing. I think it's on both parts of we're going to educate the people coming in going, hey, here you have a lot of degree options, but understand your degree options come with consequences. If you get a degree in, gender studies versus a degree in chemistry versus a computer science degree, those will likely have different outcomes.
Mhm.
So make sure you choose wisely and understand what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Because you come in, you can't just say, I got a degree, why am I not getting a job? Well, you got a degree that the market does not need,
Right.
or does not place a high price tag on, right? Whereas an engineering degree, it does.
And I think it's interesting because the schools can be innovative as well, by the way. One of the things that I saw recently, which I was super impressed with, is this idea that you could be working today, and if the business has got a good school in its neighborhood and it decides to partner with them, why don't you turn that into an apprenticeship towards a degree? Why don't you have that person? So business benefits, because now you're investing in that individual because you see their potential, and you're going to say to them, we're going to send you to train at this university. It's going to enable you to learn new skills and techniques for the role that you're doing. And by the way, after 3 years of doing that, you're going to end up with a degree. Can you imagine how that's going to help the 55 million people that are sitting out there right now who, frankly, maybe have started their journey but couldn't complete it because of the costs, or they have other skills that are just relevant, and you can find a way to bridge that divide? How much power that will bring to the economy of the US? I mean, you've got such a diverse talent pool in the US that we're not enabling by being smart around how we bring them into education and then support their trajectory for success.
So, and wow, we've gone really deep into the education system where we like to spend a lot of time. You're the CTO, so you hire these people internally, right? Not
Yep.
just from your platform perspective, but internally you are hiring people, engineers, and maybe you're in charge of product too. A lot of times CTOs can dip their toes into that. So what do you find in all these interviews you're doing? Have you found a couple of like, hey, here are things I'm seeing that are really cool, and here are things that I'm seeing that like, wow, this is a definite problem internally?
So when we do our hiring, we look at, I call it the 3 C's. We look at culture fit first, because I think anybody who's in a startup, they have to be a part of the value system, or it's certainly aligned with the values of the system. We're not trying to build a family here. We're building a team. And in building a team, we want to make sure that you understand our values and why they're important to our success and our execution. The next piece is the capacity to master. Do you have the ability to learn? Can you continually explore and remain curious and adapt? And because technology, every 3 years it's changed. So the guarantee we're going to be changing with it, because that's our way to stay ahead, and that's how we can execute our competition. And then the third piece is, what capabilities do you have today? And that's where we look at the specific skills that they have. Now, in terms of the market, what's really interesting for me, I thought data scientists would be the hardest to find. But fortunately, programs started to get offered in 2017, and 5 years later, there's a lot of data scientists out there. So that's not my challenge anymore. I can actually get the data scientists relatively easily. The big one for me, the surprising one, it's not engineers, actually. Engineers are they're hard to find, but I think if you know how to target your market, you can find the right engineers and bring them in and grow them and make them successful. And they'll buy in because of the mission and the impact that they can have. And so they don't get distracted by Candyland and all of the sort of perks that you get with the high hazard pay and the food and the laundry and so on. That's all to keep you happy and widget working, rather than working on big problems and focusing on the future. So that's how I sell it to my hires, and hopefully they get the bug. DevOps, that's the challenge. You need, DevOps, a lot of people move in from DevOps from sort of the networking side or the infrastructure side. And that's valuable, but actually it's engineers. DevOps is the next platform for engineers. If you want to be a really successful engineer, figure out how to be a DevOps engineer, because you're sitting in the intersection of both worlds. And now infrastructure, the old days of going out and trying to find a data center and stand up hardware and make sure you've got capacity. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. But you do have to worry about, how do you make deployments move smoothly? How do you make sure that all of the pieces are working together in the stack so that there's no risk to your production environment? And then how do you automate as much of that as possible so you can use technology as a servant? That is an incredibly powerful.
So my favorite part of that, right, is if I think back to, one of the very first comments that you made, right, which is like, I was watching these people do trading, and I was like, man, what you're doing right there can be automated. What you're doing right there can be solved really quickly. And that's what DevOps is doing, right? Is we're slowly realizing that with documentation, with automation, infrastructure as code, Terraform, and all of these other things, you're like, man, you're doing so many things that are just so manual that you just don't need to do that. And if you can figure out how to put the building blocks together and create these awesome abstraction layers, there's there's something special that you can do in a very unique amount of time. It's like, how do we get to a world where, your job is automated? You're like, the engineer automated that person, but now we're automating it. It starts to get crazy, right?
Yeah, and then you can actually start to focus on the product in a way that really makes it exciting, and you don't have to worry about all of these other pieces of the infrastructure or anything like that anymore. And so I think the DevOps role is going to be it's an underappreciated asset today. It is going to be the gold standard of the future.
Yep.
I really feel that intersection is important.
And one question I've had with people, and when we've talked about like how DevOps is hard to find, I think one of the big issues comes down to is like DevOps isn't really defined, right? Like there's so many different layers of DevOps. There's so many different, like now we've got like DevOps, and now we've got SRE, and now we've got performance engineering, and like, and you could do DevSecOps. Like you've got like 15 layers of DevOps. So part of it's just like, the hard part is the ambiguity around, well, what does it mean to be a DevOps engineer? Like, what does it mean to do a certain function, and how do we find that? How do we cut through it and make sure we're placing people in the right stuff, right? And how do we know they're from the engineering background instead of the systems administration background? Because those are two very different people, right? So
now you know why I have my 3 C's. The values, right? You got to have the people with the right values, and they have the curiosity or the capacity to master. And then they have the capabilities today. Because if they've got those first 2, they can do anything. They can move into the new opportunities that emerge. I started the conversation earlier with Taylor, where I said, when I started my job, I had the way into the industry was a computer science degree. And then when you came out of it, and again, I'm going to date myself, show you how old I am. When you came out of it, you were basically classed as a clerical assistant more than anything. There wasn't such a concept as a software engineer or IT support. In 5 short years after graduating, you now suddenly had people who specialized around building the PCs, the IT support desk. You had the programmers, you had programmer analysts. You then started to see the emergence of software engineers. Then you started to see network administrators, and then you started to see QA engineers, QA SDETs, and you started to see this proliferation of skills. And that is the beauty of innovation, fundamentally, is it starts small, but when it takes off, it opens up opportunities to so many other areas. And that specialization, which drives growth and drives execution and capability, is the powerful accelerator for those opportunities for others to come in. And they don't need to have all the skills, but if they've got that capacity to master, and they're really hungry, and they've got courage, and they're willing to lean in and learn, the world's their oyster.
Yeah, we're seeing DevOps grow like you're seeing it, and we are getting more and more DevOps roles brought to us as a company, because more and more people are facing what you're facing. Hey, I got software engineers, but man, I can't find a good DevOps person. That's really what I need more than anything else right now. Very urgent need.
Well, I'm trying to encourage my software engineers to think about leveling up into DevOps, and I say leveling up because I actually think DevOps is another level up above software engineering. If you can actually grasp both sides of the world and work in that world, I think your own opportunities will accelerate.
So let's get to some fun stuff. Where are you from? You're not from the US. I think we know that, right? We can hear it in your voice. Where are you from?
My accent gave it away again, eh? I was born in Zambia, Kitwe, Zambia, in the Copper Belt. And so I lived in Africa for a number of years, traveling from Zambia. Well, it's a long story, but when I was 6, I was schooled in Denmark for 2 years. Then I went to school in Zimbabwe. And then when I was 12, I went to boarding school in Scotland. Predominantly stayed in Zambia till I was 13. And then it was Nigeria, Morocco, then parts of Europe, finally settling in the UK.
That's a pretty typical path. That was like my upbringing, a little bit in Zambia, a little bit, Nigeria. Yep.
I'm a nomad.
So if I can go into the controversial today topic, right? Another person who originally was from Africa, who's in the tech space, has recently purchased Twitter. How do you feel about that?
I think it's good news. I really do. I mean, look, the simple fact is Elon Musk is, I think he has a very libertarian point of view, and that's healthy. The conversations that are going on now where you're frightened to speak your mind is not healthy. And for people to kind of criticize you for being able to speak your mind means that they have something to defend. And it's really a power play on their part versus open, free expression and enabling a discourse and being able to call out the bullshitters. If you excuse me.
The whole cancel culture thing drives me bonkers because it's like cancel culture, like in a lot of ways, it's just like we're trying to like make it to where like things aren't so silent with the contradiction of like shut them down and make them silent. And it's kind of like this oxymoron that just doesn't make sense to me with cancel culture.
No, and the truth is they're in the minority. They're just a very vocal minority. So in essence, they're bullies. They are society's bullies. And that really frustrates me. So somebody like Elon Musk, who's kind of open to being criticized himself because he wants to engage in that conversation, I think that's going to be healthy for Twitter in the long run. Taking it private means that he can actually focus in on how to optimize the service to enable those free discussions, that free speech. So I'm actually bullish. I think in the long run it will be healthy for us.
I do too, and I'm interested. I'm excited, and where the real interest lies is I did not grow up in Nigeria and Scotland and Denmark, and Elon did. You did. Elon's from South Africa, but the same idea of like you guys see this from a different angle than someone who's just like I said, grown up, born and raised in Chicago, and I do think sometimes you get caught up in like this is just the way it is, and you're seeing it from a different perspective of it's unhealthy that we can't have an argument and one side can choose to leave the argument, but instead we can argue, we can say what we think, we can be wrong, we can be right, whatever. I hate that concept. In fact, I hate the concept. They keep talking misinformation, disinformation, whatever. You mean being wrong? That's part of the world, and people say misinformation. I say misinformation on this sometimes. I've rarely been wrong. My wife has caught me once or twice being wrong, but
they always.
you're wrong, right? And so I made a mistake. I said something that was wrong, and I think that's a healthier place for us to be. I am excited to see and I'm not personally on Twitter, but to see what Elon is going to do with it. It's also been a fun bit of controversy in the world that's not terribly
another element of drama. Look, I mean, fundamentally, if you can't have a conversation, how can you help the next generation critically think? How can you help them identify misinformation and propaganda if all they're being forced to do is listen to misinformation and propaganda? You've got to build a healthy discourse. Healthy discourse means that sometimes there is going to be disagreement, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you can find a path to alignment, or you can learn and change perspectives in a way that's healthy for society. And that's what free speech gives us.
That's awesome. I love it. I love hearing it. All right, some more fun stuff. Let's see. You've lived in like 38 different countries. What is, and I know you live here now, so obviously we'll say the US. So let's cross off the US from being an option. What's the coolest place you've lived? Like your favorite spot?
So very humbly, it would be the Scottish Highlands. I mean, I love the Scottish Highlands.
I'm Scottish, so
it's beautiful. I mean, the way of life in Scotland, the people. It's a pretty harsh environment with the weather and so on and so forth. But it has moments of spectacular beauty that are hard to beat.
You ever see the Loch Ness Monster?
Not yet.
I did, but it was like a sticker on the side of the boat. We when we went there, we were one of the few who we did have a day. It was like 80 degrees and sunny while we toured the Highlands. And it was like you said, it's those moments of beauty, sandwiched around a lot of rain and a lot of everything else. But man, when it's nice, it is absolutely awesome. That was the Scottish Highlands tour was amazing. It was amazing. All right. So where are you at now? So you're in Seattle now, right?
Yeah, I live just outside, so on the border of Kirkland and Bellevue. So kind of greater Seattle, I guess we could call it that.
All right. So if anyone were to tour Seattle, what is the one thing they have to do?
Oh, God, there's so much. Well, so let's keep it on the Scottish theme. They have to go see Copperworks Distillery.
I've been there and I've never gone.
Oh yeah, no, it's right down there on the seafront of Seattle. Pop in. It's an extraordinarily good Scotch. Well, it's American whiskey, but it's a single malt, and they have a peated version. Which, if you're going to do Seattle, come in and it kind of personifies the Northwest, right? The Northwest has always been about innovation, trying new things, and so here's a distillery company that's been able to promote a whiskey which they do out of beer mash. And it's extraordinarily good.
How long have they been there for? Because for whatever reason, man, I lived in Seattle for a long time. I lived in Seattle for the last 19 years before moving out to Nashville. Never heard of
No, I think they've been around for a while, certainly over 5 years. And they've got one of those lovely old corner buildings right down there opposite the big wheel. And it's just off Pioneer Square, which, by the way, is another. I like Pioneer Square. I mean, it's got some rough edges today, but it's actually kind of still fun and funky. But what else is there? I mean, the wine country is incredible. You notice there's a theme here around alcohol. But actually, for me, and if you can't do that, then definitely the mountains. I mean, the Cascades, North Cascades are just incredible. If you can get up there on a summer day and do the Cascade Walk for the Cascade Path,
or go to the islands.
Well, the islands.
You got a little bit about everything up there in Seattle.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think, and then of course the cuisine now is really getting really, really good. I mean, so we've got a lot of transplants coming up from California, and they have a distinctive taste that's starting to infuse itself into the local cuisine as well. And then the lifestyle is it's fun. You can ski in the winter, you can be on the water in the summer. Best summers in the world. I don't know of any other summer where you can just sit down. There's no humidity, the temperature's reasonable, and the insects aren't around. I mean, can't beat that.
I know. All right, so
last August are easily unbelievable.
Last very serious question. What's your favorite movie?
That's a good question. I think it's The Godfather.
Okay.
And the reason why is you can watch that movie time and time again, and you always come away with a different lesson. I mean, it's an incredible view into human nature and the compromises, as well as the aspirations and the decisions that we make that drive us on our paths. And it's just an incredible story.
It's a classic. Shane, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank God.
So I'm 3 for 15, 3 for 20.
Yeah, Shane has not seen nearly enough very good movies. So I'm glad he has.
You got to add in there The Deer Hunter. That's another one. That's I don't know.
No chance Shane has seen that. Okay. That's
no idea what that one is. If you led with that one, I'd be like, nope.
That's a really dark journey for human beings, but it's also it's centered around hope, and that's the really powerful piece of it, right? Is that human nature is, human beings can do pretty much anything as long as there's hope. And you give them that belief, it's incredible.
Yeah, I didn't leave The Deer Hunter with hope, but okay, I guess. I guess it's an intense movie. It's for
intense,
sure.
Absolutely.
It's intense. All right, so Kai, leave us with this. How can the people here, if they're going AstrumU, it's something I want to follow, get behind, join the team, whatever.
How can they engineer and I need to join something cool in ed tech?
If you're interested, look me up on LinkedIn, reach out to me that way. I try to respond to everybody when I can. And then the other piece is just follow us on our LinkedIn site. AstrumU's got we're pretty prolific in terms of updating, letting people know what we're doing and how we're progressing. And that's a great way to follow us. And if you learn more by following us and seeing where the business is going and you get excited by it, then reach out and we'll be happy to talk.
And as long as they fit your culture, right? Capable to learn and grow in the future. And what are your capabilities today, right?
That's right.
So you got to fit those. But if you're into DevOps, look up Kaj. So
absolutely.
All right. I love it. This was a ton of fun. Kaj, we thank you so much. We wish the best of luck to your son who's in Chicago, enjoying the South Loop, getting into game design. He should look us up in a year or so, and we can start moving him to some of the gaming studios we work with, which would be cool.
I look forward to it. I'll take you up on that, Taylor. And Shane, it was a pleasure meeting you. And thanks very much for hosting me today.
Absolutely. Sure. Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Next in.